Okay, always appreciate that. That way, no surprises. Okay, so ladies, if as you said, I'm Mr. Ray. If I start talking too fast, I'm getting too excited, let me know. Stop me. Any questions? Feel free to say something. I'll be honest with you right now, I'm dual wielding. I have the laptop up here where we're doing this, and also 240 tutoring on the other side to make sure I hit everything we need to hit to the best of my abilities. Okay, so American Revolution straight through the War of 1812. Let's see how fast we can get through this booger. Okay, so before we get into this part right here, because I didn't add this piece in, one thing they do want us to talk about, even in 240 tutoring, 8th grade especially, is kind of where we're coming from as a country. So our founding fathers will come up with some reasons why they want to break away from the British. One of them actually will be going back to some political philosophers. If you took any political philosophy classes, like John Locke, talking about the Enlightenment period, the whole idea that the government is there to protect your rights. Particularly for Locke, it was life, liberty, and property. Very nice, easy to define. Of course, we steal that and put it in the Declaration as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that's going to be one of the big reasons, one of the more academic, mental reasons why we'll break away. But into very tangible reasons, let's talk about the French and Indian War. So French and Indian War, I know this map really stinks. It's a little fuzzy, but you get the idea. The bright red right here was the original 13 colonies founded by Britain. What's pink right there, as well as the very kind of mustard yellow right here, used to be French territory. The 7 Years' War, what we call the French and Indian War, happens for various reasons, partly due to our first president as a young man. And basically, long story short, the French get kicked out. The British win, and that leaves the French portion of the French and Indian War gone, but the Indians, of course, are still there, and they are not any happier about the settlers now than they were before the war. So in the Ohio River Valley, which is this little spot right here, settlers still trying to move in. Lots of fighting goes down between the British and the Indians, and basically King George III issues the infamous Proclamation of 1763, basically telling these colonists, yes, we fought this war, but we don't want this happening to you. We don't want you being raided. We don't want you coming crying to us saying the Indians beat you up and burned down your house. So for everybody's safety and our sanity, you can't go west. The mountains were the dividing line, the Appalachian Mountains. American settlers were not allowed to go that way. And of course, it's going to make them very angry because it's valuable land out there. There's fur, you can make money. And one of the reasons why people came to the colonies was to start a new life. It's really cool because here you could come, if you could survive the nature, if you could survive angry locals or just really anything, you could have free land where back in the old country, you'd be lucky to be renting. So it was kind of the original American dream. Come over here and you can do better for your children than what you had. Wonderful thing. And of course, politics gets in the way. So here we go. So the colonists are mad about this, but they're not quite ready to throw off the British just yet. Like, okay, we don't really want to be scalped, don't really want to start fighting too much. Now, another weird thing is this. Before the French and Indian War, we had something for the colonies called salutary neglect. Basically, what's going on is England was leaving us alone. As long as we paid them their percentage, we made them happy. They pretty much let us do what we wanted to do. It was good for us, which is where we get the salutary part. And the British were fairly happy with it. There were some laws, it was technically illegal, but everyone was fairly content. French and Indian War changes that. Britain goes into horrible debt. They are actually one of the first ones to figure out how to finance war by borrowing as a nation rather than a monarchy. They kind of outspend the French, and well, that helped them win the war, but now they got to pay it. And of course, they're saying, okay, colonies, we fought this war partly to protect you. So how about you cough up some more cash? We need some more money here. Well, we don't exactly take kindly to that. The battle cry for us throughout all these different tax acts will be no taxation without representation. If we were to go back in time and ask a colonist if we could understand them, they'd probably be saying something along the lines of they don't mind paying the money. The main thing was if they're going to be paying monies, they want the British Parliament to listen to them. We'll pay your taxes, just got to listen to us. But under the British Empire, they said no. You are technically represented by by Parliament, but your representative is non-voting and technically not listen to you. You're a colony, so be quiet. Smuggling was also going on. This is a huge piece of the colonial economy, and so many of the founding fathers are also smugglers. So hey, you gotta make a buck while you can. You gotta do what you gotta do for your family, by all means. And that's where all these different acts come in. The first one they pass is the Sugar Act. Now, the Sugar Act, of course, by the name, like we tell the 8th grade kiddos, a lot of these things in history, we don't try to get too cute with the names. We'll pretty much tell you what they do. So the Sugar Act, oddly enough, reduced the tax on sugar and molasses, made it cheaper. But they did say they were going to enforce it much stricter. So if you got caught smuggling, you're out of luck because they actually are prosecuting and they are looking for them. And a really scary thing is they did have trial by jury in some cases, but in this case, you would not have one. And in fact, you wouldn't be tried in the colonies. You're going back to England, where these are not people that think like you do. They have not lived your life, and they may not understand. And that judge, I can guarantee you, would not look kindly on you as a smuggler. So they're outraged. They start protesting, they start boycotting. The act gets a whole bunch of negative press. And like many of these different acts, the Parliament does a weird thing where they back up. They blink. They'll repeal this one, and then they try another one. The next one is the Stamp Act. This one, I don't know why I didn't think about doing it, but this is the one, if you ever look it up online, the stamp that they had the English crown on. It's very official looking. It's actually kind of pretty. But the ones the colonists would make fun of it in the press was a death's head. It would have a skull and crossbones, and it was just this horrible tax. Anything paper was taxed. Newspapers, legal documents, playing cards had to have the tax to prove you paid your money. The big one for this one is this is one of the first ones where the colonists start working together. They start forming groups to help boycott this. This is where the Sons of Liberty start getting organized. They will later play a huge role in a lot of different things, especially early on in the revolution. Their underground resistance movement, depending on what side of the pond you're on, you might call them freedom fighters, you might call them terrorists for what they'll do. But at this point in time, their main thing is fairly peaceful at this point. It's just protest, boycott them, hit them where it hurts, the pocketbook. It's a direct tax paid by the colonists. Also, at this point in time, because they had to send a bunch of soldiers over here to take care of the colonists, one thing to make sure they pay their taxes. Another thing also, just in case the Indians decided they didn't want to stay west of the mountains and decided to come back over and take land they'd already lost, they sent a bunch of soldiers over, so they passed the Quartering Act in 1765, basically saying, we're sending soldiers over. It's expensive to house them. We need you colonists to take them in. So they're providing room and board to all British soldiers if there wasn't enough barracks. One thing that's always funny, every once in a while we'll have a kid like, hey, that might be kind of nice. You get a handsome young lieutenant or something like that. And it's like, yes, that might be true. You might also get old Captain Preston or some people that you don't know. And that's always a danger, having strangers in your house that are trained to fight and things of that nature. Also, they technically could be spying on you. No one ever likes that. Okay. Here's where things start getting a little more interesting, shall we say. So those are passed. The Quartering Act never goes away. The Stamp Act does get repealed, but they pass another one, the Townshend Act, because they're like, okay, we still need cash. We still need the colonists to pay more taxes, because I think if I can find it, I'll let Doc know about it, and she can share it if you're interested. I think the average thing for like taxes over here in the colonies was actually much lower than it was in England. So that's another reason why the British didn't want to listen to them. So the townsmen are going to start taxing a whole bunch more other things like glass, tea, paper, lead was another one as well. And this is pretty big because back then tea was a very common drink. It was the favorite drink of the colonists. Taxes paid when the goods arrive before they're sold by the merchants. This doesn't lead to the Boston Tea Party, but this is where they start doing things like tarring and feathering people, which, depending on how much they didn't like you, might be very hot tar, might be just blue, very warm tar. But it's not very nice. It peels off hair. It's kind of like waxing on steroids. It might take skin. It's gruesome. It's rough. I didn't put this in here, but if you ever, well, when we do with the kids, sometimes we'll show them a clip from a HBO series called John Adams, and it shows that tarring and feathering scene. And as Doc can tell you, it's rough. The kids usually get that one pretty good, pretty well. So things start happening. Boycotts and protests are still going on. Things are getting a little more violent, oftentimes organized by the Sons of Liberty. So Parliament once again blinked and repeals it. So then we get into where things get extremely bloody, or begin to get bloody at least. So as we go on, they are passing other little acts here and there to try to keep trying to get cash out. And the colonists are still very, very angry. In Boston, in early March in 1770, a protest starts out the customs house. Basically, what's going on is there's a young soldier out there who is technically a sentry. He starts getting harassed by a big group. This guy, I'll bet you, is probably in his late teens. He's a very young man, probably just from the old country. Not exactly too frightening by himself. Things start getting a little heated. He calls for backup. And basically, they have a line of soldiers. Their guns are loaded. They have bayonets. The colonists start throwing clamshells. They wind up throwing snowballs with rocks in them, too. At one point in time, a young soldier, which we think is a young soldier, goes down and accidentally discharges his firearm when he falls because they were loaded, because they didn't know what exactly would happen. And it was not an order to shoot. It's just some of these guys freaked out. It's dark. It's cold. These guys are literally yelling, kill them, knock them down. So, of course, they're frightened. So it's not an order to shoot by Captain Preston, who's leading this detachment of soldiers, but some of them do fire into the crowd, killing 5 people, including a colonist who was named Crispus Attucks, who was an African-American man. He was free. And then we have the famous picture over here on the down the left with the little dog by Paul Revere, showing the colonist side of the massacre. Soldiers in a line, looks like Captain Preston putting out the order to fire, very, very militant looking on a crowd that looks fairly harmless. In fact, they're even saying, please stop, don't shoot. And there's a lot more blood and a lot more guys down than what really happened. They will get off. They actually get defended by John Adams, our second president, because under English law, a sentry is to be held inviolate. Basically, you cannot attack them. They have the right in English law to defend themselves with deadly force if need be. So technically, they can get away with this. So here's a bigger picture of that. Oftentimes with the 8th graders, we'll do kind of a scenery investigation, different quarters. They talk about things they see, and they'll mention things like the dog, of course, for whatever reason. They love to mention the dog. Then they'll start talking about the soldiers. Some of them have this evil smile on their face. They look pretty gruesome, pretty evil. Large billowing smoke, people dead, lots of guys down on the ground. It looks just like a pitiful scene. Okay, so this, of course, riles the colonists up because all of a sudden there has been bloodshed for sure now, and it has been uniformed soldiers of the British who did the killing. That being said, they still need money. So the British basically get the Tea Act out. This is basically, they're giving the East India Company, which is a private company with very close ties to the British government, and is working in India and will have control over a good portion of India all the way till 1857. They give them the exclusive right to sell money sell tea in the colonies. The East India Company was losing money. The British wanted to protect them. They want to help them out. Key example of lobbying, corruption, whatever you want to call it. But that being said, colonists are angry. Once again, a lot of very rich people, a lot of very important people in the colonies are involved in trading, and tea is a very large commodity. Here in America now, we drink a lot of coffee. Before the revolution, we're tea drinkers. Still, anybody here drink tea a lot? No? Nah, okay.
Sometimes I do, Mr. Ray, and it makes me feel very posh. But then on a regular day, I'm like, I just want some coffee. So if you want to feel like British, I'll warm you up some tea or brew you some Lipton sweet tea. It'll be
there
good.
We go. What's funny with the eighth graders, we even did the thing where, oh, got something in the chat. What's up?
I was just reminding them that everything that we do in here, they should have already taught, and the kids should have already seen it, but many times it doesn't get to us.
And I'm sure there's some of those teachers in the elementary school who are doing an awesome job. It's just about usually they go away for summer and you forget half of what you learned. It happens. But okay, well, moving along. Keeping about this, when we do with the eighth graders this year, we actually did a little tea party for them too, and they love that. So it's one of those great times you can break out manipulatives and kind of things, kind of let them have a little thing to kind of enjoy it. So what happens with this one, with the tea tax, what's going on is this cheap tea is hurting a bunch of different guys. The Sons of Liberty are involved. They organize the Boston Tea Party, the infamous dumping of the harbor, dressed as Native Americans to destroy it. They screwed up, which is always hilarious. They did it at low tide. So they start throwing these chests into the harbor and start stacking up. So they have to jump off the boats onto the piles and smash them with hatchets to make sure it gets ruined. That being said, it also wasn't exactly a secret. There were large crowds cheering them on. There are other tea parties too. Boston was just one of the bigger ones. There's tea parties in Georgetown, Charleston, and then a couple other places. This is all in protest against that Tea Act, saying, hey, we want to be able to sell it too. We don't have to buy from the East Indiamen. This isn't fair. Here's a drawing. This drawing, I think, is from the late 1800s. You kind of get the idea. It wasn't exactly secret. And they did dress up as Native Americans, so you wouldn't know who they were. It's just kind of like, okay, guys, we all know it's Tom out there throwing tea in the harbor. But sure, it won't say anything. Of course, the British are very angry at this. We're talking about quite a sum of money. I think it was 3 ships full. And basically, what's really interesting is some of the very important people in the colonies offer to pay for it. They say, hey, we know our fellow colonists did this. We'll pay for it. We're sorry this happened. Well, the British are angry. This is disrespectful. They decide, no, we're going to make an example out of Boston. And that might have been one of the bigger problems. So they're going to pass the infamous Intolerable Acts. The British called them the Coercive Acts. In 1774, they passed this. So the Tea Act, 1773, about that same year, the Boston Tea Party goes down. And then the British passed down the Coercive Acts to teach Boston a lesson. They basically say, okay, fine, you can't handle this harbor, we'll take it away from you. No harbor for you. Also, the colony where Boston is, Massachusetts, they say no longer do you get to pick your representatives. You are going to be under royal control. We're going to establish a governor. You do what we say when we say it. Also, if you have any problems with the British official, you can't try them yourself. We're going to take them back to England, and we'll try them. Good luck at justice now. Also, that quartering act that we were kind of using before, we're really going to use it now. We're sending more soldiers to make sure you guys behave in Boston and other colonies too. And also, kind of as a weird thing, they throw in at the end as a Quebec Act, where basically they make sure that the French Catholics in Quebec are protected. Why they could throw in the Coercive Acts, I'm not exactly sure. But I don't know, maybe it made some Massachusetts Puritans very angry. But either way, it gets thrown there too. And this will be the thing that's going to kick off the First Continental Congress. Okay, so we have this thing right here. This is just something we use to help the kids kind of remember. The First Continental Congress, the colonists are getting together. We're getting about 12 out of 13 colonies sending representatives. Georgia does not send anybody. They come together in in to basically talk about the suppression of Massachusetts, the violation of self-governance, and basically how they think the British are bullying them. And they're talking about like, hey, maybe we can just ask. We're all Englishmen. We all have the rights of Englishmen. They should respect us. We're rich men too. Let's see what they do. So they write a letter asking the king, saying, hey, we're still loyal. We are still good Englishmen. We respect you. We still consider you our monarch. Could y'all please stop being such jerks? And the king pretty much says, no. I am the king. You will do what I say. Well, that goes great. We will get into this one. I got these things out of order. I do apologize about that because technically before the Second Continental Congress, we have the Lexington and Concord battle. And if I can get to that real quick, I will. Let's see. So Lexington and Concord is the first shots of the American Revolution. Things get weird here because what's happening here is this is a mission by the garrison of the British. They're worried about colonists and rebels in the surrounding countryside being armed. So they send out I think a regiment or two to go and take the arms cache at Concord. And what happens is on the way out, they swat aside a militia at Lexington. They get to Concord to find the arms cache is gone. And on their way back, they're getting shot up by colonists while they're marching back in. And that's actually where most of the casualties occur. As the British are marching back to Boston, colonists are taking pot shots. This is where you get the infamous Paul Revere saying the British are coming, the British are coming, but unfortunately, he didn't actually complete his ride. We only know about him for that reason because of a grandson of his who was looking to make a little bit of cash. This man right here, 8th grade, they need to know him. I don't think you guys do. This guy's name is Wentworth Cheswell. He's actually one of the guys who does complete the ride, as well as a young woman does too. So, okay. So moving back a little bit. So we're told no by the king. And honestly, we formed the Second Continental Congress. This is where the Declaration of Independence will be adopted and written. But before we get to the part where we decide to break up with Great Britain, pretty much by text, we send out the Olive Branch petition, once again saying, hey, King George, we are still loyal. We still respect you. We think you are God's chosen representative for the British people. You are here by right. You can, we can fix this. It's not over. It's okay. I know things have happened. Bloodshed has happened, but hey, we can get past this. We are loyal. The king slammed the door in their face because basically at this point in time, Bunker Hill had already happened. The British had basically forced the colonists off, even though they took heavy casualties. The king considered like, hey, I think I can crush these guys. I don't need to negotiate. So he didn't even read the letter. It's not even read, left on read. It's not even left on scene. It's just sent. It's quiet. So while this is happening, we have an Englishman who lives over here called Thomas Paine writing Common Sense, a very small pamphlet basically talking about why the colonists need to leave. And that's where we'll start getting the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, which is essentially the breakup letter. It's the reasoning for why we are now going to end our association with Britain. We've been telling the king we are loyal, we respect you, we will follow your orders, we just want representation. So we break out John Locke, talking about we have certain rights that are unalienable of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That government comes from the consent of the governed. And by that same token, if the government does not protect their rights, they have the right and the duty to overthrow that government. And we pass this out. We start using, talking about all this stuff endowed by our creator, talking about things of like, we have basically tried, we'll list a whole list of grievances against the king. Because why colonies originally have royal charters by the monarch. So they're basically saying, he has done this, he has done that, he has quartered troops among us in peacetime, he has done X, Y, and Z. It's a whole list of grievances before we get to the very end where we talk about, and now we must leave. We've been left with no choice. early on in the war, it does not go well for the Americans. They are fighting one of the best trained armies in the world, as well as one of the biggest navies. This is pretty much a losing proposition. I'll bet you $5 if we were to go back in time and not have the hindsight, we'd be betting on the British to win. We'd be betting they would crush them, crush the colonists. Honestly, another fun thing too is actually most colonists weren't really one side or the other. Most colonists are just trying to live their day-to-day life. So these losing battles are happening. George Washington will have his army, and he does an awesome job of basically holding that army together because he knows that that army is crushed. It's going to be basically the end. So to keep that swan song from playing, he keeps on the move and keeps on going, hangs in there until Saratoga. Basically, General John Burgoyne leads a huge army down from Canada across New York, and we turn the tables. Instead of fighting in line like the British are used to fighting, where everybody's a gentleman, we stand across from each other, we shoot, we reload, march forward, shoot, and then charge. And nice, pretty lines with flags and drummer boys and flutes and the whole 9 yards. It's frontiersmen, and they're fighting Indian style. They're hiding behind trees. They're shooting British officers, which was a big no-no in war. You're not supposed to be shooting officers. You're supposed to try to capture them. We're shooting the Indian guides. They're helping him find his way through. So before MapQuest, your way through the woods would probably be a local native. So when they're doing this, they're basically leaving them where they have no idea where they're at. And basically, this will be one of the major victories. This is the turning point. This whole time, we send Ben Franklin, who's a very famous person, someone they do need to know about, to France, trying to convince the French. Yes.
So the Battle of Saratoga, that's the turning point of the whole revolution, right? Okay, just want to make
Yes,
sure.
ma'am.
I know that's usually like a major question.
Yes, ma'am. Saratoga is a turning point because this is what convinces the French to come help us. Because before this, Franklin's like, hey, we're fighting your worst enemy. We know you guys are always down for fighting the British. Why don't you help us? And the French are like, you're going to die. You're not going to do it. This convinces them that, hey, maybe these colonists can do it. Maybe they got a shot. Okay, there'll be more battles. Saratoga, according to 242 Dream, is the one that apparently y'all really need to know. It doesn't really bring anything up about the other battles. 8th grade, we do talk about the last battle. Last battle of Yorktown. Basically, one of the major forces led by Lord Cornwallis, a very famous and very important British general, is surrounded and besieged in Yorktown, bottled up by the French. He can't escape Navy by water, and basically he surrenders. We'll capture some redoubts and force his hand. And all of a sudden, these colonists who didn't think would last too long have beaten the British Army in the field. And we get the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Basically, the British make some promises, and we make promises. Both of us go back on some of our promises, of course. So the two sides signed their treaty in 1783. The British promised to leave what is now the United States. All English territory from Mississippi River east, not including Canada, was given to us. It's going to be a huge piece. Hopefully you can see that from your side. It's going to be the green piece under here. Okay, good. Because with me, that's where I have the video thing, so I can't quite see that. So that green spot right there, that is going to be U.S. territory now. The British aren't gone. They're still up there in Canada, kind of waiting, kind of plotting, sitting there rubbing their hands like, okay, maybe these guys will fall and we can come back. The Spanish, oddly enough, get a piece of some of the territory the British do secede on the western Mississippi because they helped us out, actually. They also get Florida back. And we promised to give the property of loyalists, people who stayed loyal to the British regime in America, we promised to restore it back to them, to pay them for it. Don't exactly do that. And the British promised to abandon all military outposts in the Ohio River Valley. They don't quite do that either. They kind of do, but not really. It's kind of like, hey, we might be back. We don't know. We shall see. Okay, and that ends our revolution. So, some good things about this. Hi, love. Okay, so one of the big things about here is the United States is now a new independent country. We need to create a government. We kind of have a government during the revolution. It does become the Articles of Confederation. This is our first shot. And just like many a breakup, we go from one extreme to the other. We go from a very controlling monarch run by King George III with his spectacles and other infamous traits to a very weak one. Can't really do much. And there's lots of differences between the North and the South still, even at this point. Become a symbol of liberty, gave rise to more equality, egalitarianism. That'll be a big thing for us. We lose about 25,000 American casualties, hundreds of thousands of loyalists, slaves, and natives flee to Canada. It's pretty catastrophic. It's a huge thing. We got to pick up the pieces. We're also $74 million in debt. States also have debts. Soldiers returning from home. We're not being paid. The economy is in shambles. It's not exactly a great time, to say the least. It's one of those things of modern day, you look at new countries and they have very, very similar problems. And people will talk about like, hey, look at America, we do so much better. It's like, well, we went through it too, just at a much earlier date. But okay. Da-da-da. So the key thing about the Articles of Confederation we set up is it's all about giving the states the power. They're the ones who do almost everything. As you see in this little cartoon, we love using this with the kids because they get the idea really fast. Massachusetts, Virginia are the big, strong people here. The states have all the power. Little central government, Uncle Sam right there is pretty weak. Can't do much, can't force him to do anything. He can only ask. If these two get into it, he's going to have to let them duke it out because he wouldn't last very long in that fight. So it's the first try of coming without a king. So, hey, as a first shot, it's not bad. It sets up a Congress. Everyone has one vote. Every state had to agree to make any changes to pass a law. You'd have 9 out of 13. Each state had its own governments that had power different from the federal government. They're the ones who get taxes. They regulate commerce. They issue licenses like marriage and things like that. They ratified any amendments. They had the local government. They could print money. They could pass laws. So you could potentially have 13 different currencies running around, which would make really buying and selling anything a nightmare. All the federal government could really do was declare war, make peace, borrow money, of course, set the value of money, weights and measures, and also establish a postal service. Whoop-de-doo. One thing we talk about with the kids, the big one, is the federal government could not collect taxes, and that's the big kicker. All they could do is beg for money from the states, and most of the time the states aren't going to give them anything. So they can't enforce laws, they can't collect taxes, they can't resolve conflicts between states. If two states want to go at it, they can't do nothing. It's very weak. Well, it lasts, not too long, but not too short either. Lots of problems with it. And the founding fathers will eventually figure out, holy crud, we got to get away from this thing. We got to fix it. Let's see. That being said, there were some great things that it did do. It did find out we have all this land from the British. It created a way we can sell it. You don't really know about this, just know it exists. It's called land ordinance. We can now sell land. We have an organized way of doing it. And according to 240 tutoring, y'all don't seem to need to know about the Northwest Ordinance. Yeah, you don't need to know about the Northwest Ordinance, but just know it establishes the way we can bring states in. We'll still actually kind of use this to an extent. Instead of free males, it's just free citizens. So 5,000, your territory, you have a representation in Congress, they just don't vote. At 60,000, you can apply for statehood. You get state constitution to be drafted. You have the same freedoms and rights as a average Native American in any other state. Thankfully, we don't do any of that. Your state came in later than my state, so I'm better than you stuff. Thankfully. Okay. So strengths and weaknesses. Core 242 and things you really need to know is the national government can't tax. They can't raise armies. They can't settle problems. There's a whole lot of things they can't do. And that's what made them so stinking weak. Now, I don't have it in here. Really, one of the final straws is something called Shays Rebellion. Basically, angry veteran farmers in Massachusetts are tired of having their land taken because they can't pay their debts because the money's not worth anything. So they decide to put their experience as soldiers to good use and burn the state down, saying, okay, you'll take my place. How about I take your state? It gets put down by the Massachusetts militia, oddly enough, but they're asking for help from the other states, and everybody's just looking at them like, nah, bro, not my fight. Why should I help you? And at the same time, everybody's thinking, holy crap, that could have been me. So the founding fathers will go to the Annapolis Convention. This is the Constitutional Convention. They're going to sit in a air-conditioned, closed hall in jackets and all this very warm gear. It's middle of summer. It's hot. It's humid. All because they do this in great secrecy, because what they're doing is technically treason. They're supposed to fix the articles. They decide to scrap it and start all over. So one of course, the big ones the Constitution will get into is going to be the Great Compromise. This is basically deciding how we're going to do voting. Whoop-de-doo. We get that going on. We're going to say, okay, so we're going to have two houses. We're going to have the House of Representatives. It's based on how many people you have. It's going to be one person for every 30,000 citizens you have. That's going to be the lower house. They get to start all tax bills. They vote for every 2 years. Then you have the New Jersey plan, which becomes the modern U.S. Senate. Everybody gets 2 senators. I don't care if you have 2 million people or 2 billion people. You get 2 senators. And they'll be there much longer. The whole idea originally was senators weren't even voted for. Thankfully, we fixed that one. So with the kids, we talk about bicameral, talking about, it's a big word they love to use, just knowing that it means 2 house. And the 900-pound gorilla stalking the convention, of course, is slavery. The issue here is a lot of the founding fathers are kind of looking at the revolution and going, hey, we fought a war because we thought they weren't treating us equally. Maybe we shouldn't have slaves. And a lot of them are thinking at this point in time it's going to die out because all those things they're using slaves for originally, growing tobacco, growing indigo, it's not really making that much money anymore. So like, okay, the next 20, 30 years, it'll go away. But in the meantime, let's put some protections in there to keep the South happy. So basically, they make it where you can't make any rules about the slave trade till 1808. And it does provide some small things about protection, although you'll never find slavery mentioned in the original parts of the Constitution. Okay, 2 plans. Whoop-de-doo. Oh, here's the other one. Because some of the larger states down south want to count slaves for purposes of representation, but not for taxation, we get the 3/5 compromise. Basically, they'll say you can count 5 slaves for 3 free citizens for taxation and representation. Make everybody okay. Politics is all about finding the devil you can make a deal with. It's not pretty. Okay. So this one is right here in 242 for sure. Talking about the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists. This one is basically all about getting this Constitution ratified, approved. The Anti-Federalists don't want to do it. They want something more like the Articles because they want the states to have the power. They're the ones, they're led by Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry, and they're all about saying we need to protect the individual. The states are best equipped to do that. We're close to the states. The states are our homes. They will protect us. It's all about individual people and states, then promoting the good as a whole, which is going to be the Federals. It's all about the rights of the individual. Then we have the guys right here, and Doc, I didn't put the slide in where we had the song play, but hey, have you guys ever seen Shrek 2? Yeah. But you remember yeah, I didn't put it in here just because I wouldn't be able to keep a straight face for nothing. But basically, the Federals, you can kind of think of them as fairy godmother when she's sitting there singing, I need a hero. That's these guys. They're looking for somebody strong enough to come and protect them. Not Wilson's by any means, but they want somebody who could go toe-to-toe with another country if we need to. Because we're young and we don't want to get beat up. They want a strong central government, strong enough to protect them, to actually do something and promote the public good, but they don't want a tyrannical one. They don't want a dictator by any means. They just want something strong enough to work. Maybe a little more pragmatic. They're led by Alexander Hamilton of infamous fame with the infamy with the current musical, James Madison, who will later be a president, and John Jay, our one future first Supreme Court Chief Justice. Oh wait, no, it's John Marshall. Scratch that. Don't scratch the part about John Jay. Want something that's going to work? Big deal. Whoop-de-doo. Henry, Mason, Adams. Federalists are Jay, Hamilton, and Madison. So yes, the Federalists are wanting a strong national government with 3 branches filled with men of reputation. You can read that as rich people, if you would like, or people who should know what they're doing. Anti-Federalists are going to argue that the state should have the power. A Bill of Rights is going to be there. They want a Bill of Rights. They want something in writing to prove that the rights of the individual will not be violated. Thankfully, they gave in. They had the Bill of Rights at the end to get enough people to approve this thing. When the debates go on in all the states, the Federalists produced the Federalist Papers, which is very famous. It's got some interesting things here. They're putting them out in papers for people to read, explaining why this new Constitution will work, why it's a good thing in the Federalist Papers. But they do add the Bill of Rights just to make sure everybody is okay with that. And then we get into the Bill of Rights, because on 242, and they do actually apparently want the younger ones to know them, and that's really cool. I'm very glad. So, you guys hopefully know some of your rights in the Bill of Rights. Remember, this is just the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. They're all about protecting the individual. The big one is the First Amendment. This is probably one, like with the 8th graders and with my government kids, because I teach government economics as well. I often joke with them, like, when in doubt, First Amendment. It's your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, your freedom of press, your freedom to petition, and your freedom to assembly. So you can say what you want, believe what you want, print what you want within reason, complain to your government, and get together with your friends as long as you're not breaking stuff and burning things down. Things of that nature. These are considered inalienable rights. Of course, the second one is the one a lot of kids actually do know. Everybody just forgets about the well-regulated militia part. So basically talking about the people should have the right to keep and bear arms, should not be infringed, because one of the key things about the arguments for this is without this, we wouldn't have had the revolution, because we would have had a bunch of guys with no guns. So good luck fighting the army. The founding fathers put this one in there. Third, honestly, was probably just a reaction against that Quartering Act. Basically saying we will never be able to have soldiers put in somebody's house in times of peace, in peacetime, explicitly. So they can't be saying, hey, we have 3 guys from Lackland, would you please put them up in your house for a while? Or from the local Air Force base or Army base or whatever. They can't ask, but they can't force you to, thankfully. Fourth is all about search and seizure. Basically, it's protection against having a warrant issued against somebody without probable cause, as well as having to have a warrant to search stuff, or in the very least, a very good reason, probable cause, to stop and search that person. Whole thing come back with a warrant. Because by that time, technically, they have to convince a justice of the peace or somebody of that nature that there's something wrong. Fifth Amendment. So this one, of course, big one remains silent. Other ones in here too. The key thing, 240 tutoring talks about mainly about the self-incrimination. So remaining silent and double jeopardy. So if you get off with a crime, they can't try you twice for the same crime with the same evidence. They need new evidence. Sixth Amendment, your right to your freedom, your speedy trials. These are once you get into a trial, it has to be quick. You can't be for months. It has to be public. It has to be local, or as local as you can get. The jury can't be automatically thinking somebody's one way or the other. You have to know why you're there. You can confront the witnesses, and witnesses can be made to appear if they refuse to testify. And also, moving right along, you also have the right to an attorney. So that's where you get the public defenders from. Very important thing. Also, we get in the Seventh Amendment. This one, if you're going to sue somebody for more than $20, according to the Constitution, you have the right to a jury decide your case. Key example we use with the 8th grade, and I also use my government kids because it gets your attention, is infamous McDonald's case where the elderly lady sued McDonald's for hot coffee giving her 3rd-degree burns. So, yes, you have a right to a jury decide your case. 8th Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. So, kind of prevent that whole dunking, stocks, other horrible things being used as punishment. 9 and 10, jokingly call them the terms and conditions. This is basically 9. You have other rights. These are just the big ones. That's the whole idea about this one. Other things you have rights for, they're just not written here. There's just the big 8. And 10 talks about federalism. Basically, if it's not given to the federal government to do explicitly in the Constitution when you read the articles, it's the states who do it. That's why states deal with such things as education. Originally, they dealt with marriage. They deal with things like morals. They deal with all kinds of different things that the federal government's not allowed to touch, technically.
Okay, can we just say, Rebecca, I'm so sorry. She's in Road Hall, Mr. Ray, on campus. And so like Road Hall is so creepy at night. And like the lights are going on and off, but I spent years in Road Hall. It's all good.
I'm thinking because there's no motion because I'm just sitting here.
It's a motion one.
Right? Because I get up and I'm like halfway to the light and it turns on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
there
a
we go.
motion sensor.
Yeah, those motion sensors, I like them, but they're creepy.
So just ignore the black screen every now and then.
Oh, no worries, man. No worries at all. Okay. Okay. So 242, interestingly enough, doesn't seem to care about the early presidents, really. But this pops up with some things every once in a while. It does apparently want you guys to know about the Washington's first presidency. So, of course, Washington's our first president. That's one reason why he's called the father of our country. He does lots of first things. One of the things he does is he makes sure we try to stay neutral when France and Britain go at it once again, and what will turn out to be the Napoleonic Wars after the French Revolution. So France goes crazy. We tell the kids, like, think about it like you have a friend who was your best friend for a while, and they just kind of go weird on you. Like they start doing strange things and kind of freaking you out. That's kind of how we start treating France, because France starts chopping people's heads off and like getting a little too crazy over there. So we're like, okay, bro, we support you, but stay over there. And we want to do business with Britain. So we basically say, you know what? We're going to be neutral. We issued the right after the war started between Britain and France, say we're to be strictly neutral. We're saying we're to tell our people to be neutral. Don't be helping anybody. We're just here to do business. We'll sell to both of you. We don't care. The thing is, it's going to anger people in the U.S. because some people think we should get involved because France helped us. After all, they helped us win the revolution. Without them, we might still be British. And some people wanted us to do a little more because they want to trade with Britain a little more. But hey, no pleasing some people. Okay. So before we get too far down the road, just because it's in the history portion. So our first president is George Washington. He's on the dollar bill, the father of our country. He steps down after 2 terms and actually impresses King George III, who says if he actually does it, he'll be the best man in the world to give up the potential to be a dictator if he wanted to. So we get our second guy, John Adams. Poor guy doesn't do a whole lot. He only is a 1-term president. A lot of weird things happen with him. Then we get Jefferson. So what's going on here with Jefferson, the reason why he'll be important is 243 wants you to know about the Louisiana Purchase, of course. So Jefferson originally just wanted to buy New Orleans. He wanted to buy the right to trade out of the port of New Orleans. So he approaches Napoleon, who had literally just lost Haiti to Toussaint Louverture, and actually the first truly successful slave revolt in world history. And his whole plan of world domination, at least for North America, was using Haiti as a jump-off point. So he says, hey, how about you just buy the entire Louisiana Purchase for 15 mil? I need money. I need to fight Britain some more. I could use money much more than I could use this land. And Jefferson does. He buys it at 3 cents an acre.
Mr. Ray, they do this on the STAR test as well. They will do this. I will almost bet you money. They're going to show a map and you see the different territories and where, I don't know if that's peach or what sand color in the, maybe not sand, but where the Louisiana Purchase is, they're just gonna have that section and be like, hey, what is this land? And you're gonna need to know that it's the Louisiana Purchase.
Yes. And the big thing about this too is oftentimes with eighth grade, they love to focus on the point that it doubles our size. With this, we go, we're times two. We're bigger.
Yes. They mirror, and like we mentioned before, y'all, eighth grade US history is basically elementary all over again. So everything that you're learning tonight at one grade level or another, it's being taught. So Mr. Ray is reading so he's literally going through the EC through 6. So keep that in mind. So when we talk about the questions that we're seeing, you're going to be, does that make sense? They're going to base this test. You can get an idea of it on a STAR test. So if you wanted more questions, go to the STAR test. It's kind of crazy, but I believe, in fact, I know there's the Louisiana Purchase question, that and the Nile River. That's
when I was in 11th grade, when I had to take the US history STAR, like I vividly remember the Louisiana Purchase, like asking how much did it cost, like how much did they buy it for, and seeing a map like this and being able to, like, where was Spain, where was Louisiana, like, you know, knowing the different areas of the map. So I vividly remember having to know the different territories.
Yes, you will see it again, and probably they'll have a map and the Appalachian Mountains. They'll be like, what is this mountain range? So where you see where, yes, you see where Mr. Ray's mouse thing is, that's the Appalachian Mountains. And they'll say, what mountain range is it's going to be the Appalachian. And then the Rockies are over to the Midwest, right?
Yeah,
Midwest.
Right where you see Pikes Peak is, that's part of them. So basically this whole, it goes up like this. There's some other ones right here too. This is the Rocky Mountains. That's going to be a big thing as well.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I do know, because looking 242, they do want you to know about Lewis and Clark. With the eighth grade, I usually joke about, like, do you trust when you go to a drive-through and they give you your order? You just bought it, but hopefully you don't trust them because you know they forgot something, more than likely. So we send out Lewis and Clark to go and check this for us, say, hey, we need to know what we just bought. Go out there and check this thing. And honestly, one thing I love about, if you ever see the show America's Story of Us, they do an awesome job talking about this. And they do talk about that. Yeah, they had no idea what was out there. They were loaded for bear. They're bringing all kinds of guns. They had it. They thought there might be mammoths. They had no idea. So it's just here we go. You'll run in Sacagawea and things like that up in the upper portion right up here. Yeah, there's lots of different things, but looks like looking at 242 in the state of Texas, looks like they don't talk too much about that. They just talk about Lewis and Clark going out there. They're our big explorers. We sent out another expedition too. I love to talk to the eighth graders about this one because it's one of those ones that is truly real world, that it failed pretty much because Zebulon Pike, he goes out across the prairies, which is pretty cool. I mean, very dangerous because for your Texas history, the Comanches are right here. They're big, they're bad, and they're beating everybody, including the Spanish. And he cuts out across the prairies, names Pikes Peak in Colorado, and gets picked up by Border Patrol. He's arrested, taken down into New Mexico. They basically try him and say, you know what? You're just an idiot. Get out of here. They deport him back to the United States. So it's one of those kind of like, well, that was a fun expedition, wasn't it, Mr. Pike? Okay. Now let's get into reasons why we're going to go back to war with the British again. The War of 1812 is pretty much the War of Independence Part 2. So France is still our friend. We're still trying to be friendly with them. It's kind of hard. Napoleonic Wars are going on. Britain is big, they're bad, and they're beating everybody up, and they're hanging on for dear life, strangling Europe. And basically, we kind of started thinking, like, maybe we could attack them. They're making us angry. One of the ways is called impressment. As you can see right here, they're kidnapping our sailors. So basically what would happen, you have a big British gunboat pull up next to an American merchantman and basically run out the guns and say, pull over. If you don't pull over, we're going to sink you. So, of course, they pull over. They're going to board the ship with British Marines and say, we're looking for British deserters. You, and you. You're deserters. Come with us. If you don't go, you'll be killed. And your ship might be sunk. So they're kidnapping these guys into British service. Honestly, it's even more insulting because it's not that they're just doing it to us. They're doing it to their own people, too. So they're treating us like we're still part of them. They're doing it to British merchantmen, too. It's actually really, really frightening because I don't have the videos on here just because it's a little gruesome, and I know some people might have just eaten, but it shows, if you ever see a mutiny on a bounty, it shows very detailed of basically discipline on a British Navy ship. They can flog you for just making the officer mad. If you become unconscious after that, they'll wake you up with a bucket of seawater across your back. Beatings are common. If you really mess up, they could keel haul you, dragging you along the bottom of the boat. People really don't want to join the British Navy. HR is not great here. Another thing, too, is the British are still up there in Canada. Running joke I had with a couple of my 8th graders is just think of it like that ex who wants you back. They're sitting there waiting for you, hoping you'll fail and you'll come back with open arms. So they kind of prod that along. They're arming the Native Americans. So the Native Americans stood out there in the Western territories. They're giving them guns and saying, hey, there's some nice weapons here. How about you go attack those Americans? They moved into your territory. You could let them know how you feel about that. So they're prodding the Americans along. And of course, it doesn't take too much. And we have this going on again. One thing that's not in here and not really, I've seen state Texas seem to care, but there's a Indian prophet at this point in time trying to get them to get the Native groups to work together. So it actually gets a little scary for a while. So basically we say, okay, the British are doing things to make us mad. They're distracted in Europe. Maybe we can sucker punch them. They're big, they're bad, but if we hit them in the back of the head, we might be able to win this. So we declare war in 1812. 1813, we invade Canada. We burn the Parliament House in York, which is modern day Toronto. We're doing pretty good. And all of a sudden, the Napoleon War is over. Britain can focus on us. And that's a problem. So, of course, they come back over. They do horrible. We do horrible against them. They start besieging the East Coast. This is where the national anthem gets written because Sir Francis Scott Key is in Baltimore. And basically, while they're bombing Fort McHenry, he stuck out on a British ship because for whatever reason he thought it was a good idea to try to get a friend of his out who'd been captured earlier in the British base to say, yeah, that's cool. You're a prisoner now too, right? So while he's out there watching the bomb Fort McHenry at the entrance of Baltimore Harbor, and it's just they're pounding it, and in the morning that's what the song's all about. Basically, like the bombs bursting in the air, the rocket's red glare gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. That's what it's all about. Basically, in the morning, they were up an even bigger flag saying, hey, you've been attacking us, but we're still here. We're not going anywhere. What do you do? Well, that's fine. That's dandy. So great things, but the British are running out these big ships. They're bigger, better Navy. We just can't compete. We have a smaller Navy. And what's really embarrassing is they land forces and they burn Washington, D.C., including the White House. So it's this kind of retaliation for burning the Parliament building in New York. So we kind of started that one. But what happens is basically they march in, they hold a farce of a meeting in the Capitol building and vote to burn it and all of Washington. They break in not too long after the president's family had vacated the White House running away. They steal love letters from James Madison to his wife, Dolly. They even find dinner on the table and start toasting James Madison by saying, yeah, here's to Jimmy, things like that. And then they burn it and then march back out. Extremely embarrassing. Typically, most of the time, this would technically be the end of the war. We don't give up. So, 1814, we have the last battle of this one is where we get Jackson from, because they do care that you guys know about Jackson. Jackson is the hero of New Orleans, leading a force of a few militiamen, frontiersmen, pirates even. That's where you get Jean Lafitte, a French pirate. His guys are the ones manning the cannons. frontiersmen freed slaves in basically a very ragtag force behind cotton bales and entrenchments. They take on a British army that had pretty much bested Napoleon. So it's pretty impressive. They did a pretty good job. And so this actually catapults Jackson to stardom. Like, he's the hero of New Orleans. He saved New Orleans from the British. The sad thing is the Treaty of Ghent had already been signed. It just took a while for the news to get back to America and the fighting to stop. So the Treaty of Ghent basically ends the war. The British say, fine, we'll leave you alone, but just know your place. But this will be used to, like, hey, we fought the British again. We didn't die. So, hey, this is great. And this will start something called the Era of Good Feelings. So after the War of 1812, we have the Era of Good Feelings because one of the political parties that was in there, the Federalists and Democratic Republicans, the Federalists made a huge mistake. They're very pro-British. They at one point tried to secede. So basically they committed political suicide. So they're gone. So now basically there's one political party. We're very optimistic, like, hey, we survived. We can do this. Americans might be able to do this. This experiment is not over yet. So another great thing about this is, another reason why we're so optimistic is, before we relied heavily on the British for things like anything manufactured, we start to make our own. We can't buy from them anymore. So we'll start making our own things. We go from basically being a lot of farmers, a lot of homespun, and buying from the British, Mr. John Bull over here. And we go from that to, we're starting to industrialize. We'll start having our own textile factories. We invent the cotton gin, which unfortunately saved slavery. But other than that, that's basically the end. We're happy now. We're feeling better about ourselves. It didn't go great, but we feel good. We think we can do this. We're a new country. We have some optimism. We're young and dumb.
Well, that is certainly many times when you're young and dumb, it's like it gives you that motivation because you don't know what's coming. And then when you get older, you just get bitter and don't want to do anything. But Mr. Ray, this is amazing. What questions do we have for Mr. Ray? And I know y'all were taking notes and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin because that's so good. Here, I'm going to stop the recording if that's okay.